Right, I think we're just coming into 2 o'clock, so fantastic. And welcome everyone who has joined so far. I'm sure we'll have other colleagues joining as we move along, but as we did allocate 2 o'clock for the start, I suggest we kind of get going with today's session. So first things first, just a bit of housekeeping. I hope colleagues can all hear me. Please nod that you can. Good, right? I can see nods, so that's good news. And just a bit of housekeeping. If you're not speaking, if you could stay on mute through the time, please, just in case of any background noise. I know I've done that myself, where you go off mute and suddenly there's a particularly if you're at home, there might be a washing machine buzzing in the background, or if you're in the office, there may be a colleague who wants to say hello and it's like, nah. So yeah, so please, if you could just stay on mute, that would be fantastic. And hello, welcome to today's session as part of the celebration of Black History Month on the Southwark Stands Together programme. It's fantastic to see people here and joining today. Just by way of introduction, my name is Stephen Gaskell. I'm the Director of Strategy and Economy and hold the responsibility for the coordination of the Southwark Stands Together programme across the council, working with a whole host of colleagues who have responsibility for various aspects, and we'll get into that in my introductory presentation. Two things I wanted to say right at the outset. First is an apology, and then secondly, it's a thank you. The apology, colleague, goes to the fact that we know we had to change the date of this particular session, and that was simply to do with what was a very punishing October diary for colleagues. So I am sorry, and I'm particularly sorry for those colleagues that did join a session that we thought had been cancelled out of the diary. So my apologies that you did join that session, and we had to, and it wasn't there. It wasn't that we didn't want to turn up. It was just that we had agreed to move it to today. So forgive us for that, and thank you for your patience in understanding what is a very busy time for so many of us. So thank you very much. And the thank you is for being here today and for bearing with us and working with us on that. And a thank you also to all those who've pulled together the case studies today that we're going to look at and that we're hopefully going to have a really good discussion about. And also a huge thank you to everybody who's been involved in the work of Southwark Stands Together from the outset last summer right through to today, and no doubt for many months and years into the future. It really has been both heartening, some of what we've heard heartbreaking, but across the board a huge thank you to the work that everybody has played in making this programme the success that we've seen so far, and hopefully more progress to come. We know we've not got everything right, we know we're on a journey, and it's important, but I think just as we are celebrating Black History Month, it's important to celebrate the progress so far, and a huge thank you to all of you, many of you who are here today who've been involved in making it possible. So thank you very much. Okay. So today I'm going to start off with a summary for the next, say, 6-7 minutes, for a summary of Southwark Stands Together, what the programme is about, what we've done so far. And then what we're going to do, colleagues, is go into a series of case studies that gives you a bit more of a deeper dive into the specific areas of focus and what we're doing within the programme. We've got 7 case studies altogether. We're going to be hearing from Margaret Garner, who will be talking about the Arts Board Diversification Programme, so how we're hoping to diversify those who are represented in the arts. We're going to hear from Andrew Hillis, who will be talking about the negative effects of ethnic disproportionality, and a focus on the statistics and disproportionality and what's occurring here in Southwark. We're going to hear from Himali Topiwala, who will talk about how we're diversifying our architects industry and the work that's underway there. We'll be hearing from Libby Dunstan, who'll be talking about our Southwark Pioneers Fund, which is particularly focused on entrepreneurs of the future and how we are targeting our efforts to support those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and the work and asking us some questions about how we can move forward with that. We'll be hearing from Angela Williams, who'll be talking about positive action and the work underway as part of our broader council workforce workstream. And we'll also be hearing from Loretta Doku, who'll be talking about the work within Peckham Square, where we are and some of the next steps. So a good range, you can see there, colleagues, across what we're doing in terms of Southwark Stands Together. And I'll talk a little bit more about how the day will pan out with that in mind when I get to the end of the presentation. So today is very much about learning about Southwark Stands Together, as I say, with a deep dive on those areas that I've just touched on. But it's also about thinking about solutions. We've obviously come so far. We totally understand there's more to do, there's more to go. And so what we're really looking for from colleagues today is that kind of positive thoughts and solutions about what could come next. What ideas do you have? What feels like it's working well? What feels like we could do more of? What feels perhaps like we could do less of and prioritise differently? So focus on solutions, focus on the way forward. We know there's going to be some specific questions and we'll try and answer as much as we can, either here via the chat bar or more likely after the event, because you'll see that there are specific leads for specific areas. What we will commit to do is every question asked will get an answer. So we'll make sure that whether that's done today or later, that will be done. And we know you'll also have some very specific areas and you may have some concerns. What I would encourage you to do in that respect is we do have an SST mailbox. So if there are concerns, if there are ideas, if there are things that we run out of time with today, I would direct you to that mailbox, which we do monitor on a regular basis to make sure we capture that. For example, there may be something that comes into your mind after today's workshop that you think, oh, I wish I'd have asked that. Then ping us a mail onto that mailbox and I'll make sure that's picked up and taken to the right lead to respond to. Okay, so the next slide then, Bethan. Perfect, so there we go. I think we've covered that. So the next slide, Bethan. Thank you very much. So colleagues, the Southwark Stands Together programme, the reason why you can see healing and reconciliation there, that was the label that the Cabinet and colleagues very much wanted to give to our annual report, which was presented to Cabinet in the summer of this year. Healing, to recognise the fact that this is a healing programme, this is about healing and moving forward, and reconciliation to also reflect that. And that feels very much like the essence of SST in terms of what we're doing around standing together with colleagues from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities to make sure that we do take forward this work. And that feels like it really gives the essence of what Southwark Stands Together in all its guises is about. So it started as a programme itself in the summer of 2020, very much, as you can see, in response to what we were seeing at the time in terms of the COVID pandemic. It's hard to remember well, in some ways it's not hard to remember, colleagues, but last summer, very, very different time to where we are now. The pandemic was in a very different place. A lot of our community were hurt. Were suffering, some ultimately who are no longer with us, which is incredibly heartbreaking for those of us that have been affected, me included, in terms of loss of loved ones. So a very different place to where we are now, but the reason why, partly the reason why we wanted to move forward with Southwark Stands Together, COVID-19 was exposing the inequalities so harshly that we'd seen in the years prior to the pandemic, particularly on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and obviously the murder of George Floyd and the resultant Black Lives Matter movement was absolutely critical in moving the council forward in terms of how it responds, with a very clear intent on positive action to work together with our communities and staff. And the purpose, as it says on the slide there, is stand against all forms of discrimination and racism. It's for equalities and justice being at the heart of what we do to become an anti-racist organisation. I can just hear some background noise, so if I can ask colleagues to make sure that they are on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So the listening exercise itself we held over the summer. We were able to contact over 1,500 local people who were engaged in the programme. There were 11 themed listening events. There was an online survey. We held open days, inviting community and business to participate. And out of that, and if we can move to the next slide, Bethan, out of that came 8 work streams, which emerged with a number of recommendations. So these work streams and the way in which the Southwark Stands Together programme was organised was very much based on what the community told us that they saw as important, and therefore then how we responded. The work streams and the recommendations themselves were then agreed by Cabinet first in September of last year and then subsequently re-endorsed in October, because at the time we were going through a leadership election and we had a new leader elected with a new Cabinet in place in October of last year. Following that, the recommendations and the work streams were then endorsed as part of the refresh of the Borough Plan, which itself was signed off by Council Assembly in November. So as you can see, a reasonably pacey progress from the point of listening to what we were hearing through to agreeing a number of recommendations, work streams, and then embedding that into how the organisation operates, and in particularly the Borough Plan as its top plan overall. So what are the 8 work streams? And the first 4 are set out there. As you can see, they cover a range of council programmes. So this is a bit untraditional in that there isn't a neat fit into any one department. This cuts across all departments in different ways. And what that slide does there, and I'll leave you to kind of read through each of them, but in effect it describes, hopefully in a reasonably easy way, what each of the work streams is focused on, whether that's around employment and business and supporting those businesses, particularly from Black, Asian and minority ethnic led small businesses, to progress within the Southwark economy, and also look at how we widen employment opportunities for residents from those groups. The education focus is very much about how we do create those opportunities for our young, aspiring Black, Asian and minority ethnic people who are coming forward through the education system, and how we support them crucially into the world of work and the opportunities that go from there. Health, very much about picking up, as it says, the passion and commitment, and having a particular focus on how that informs our approach to kind of addressing health inequalities, which we know, as I said, has been exposed through COVID. And culture, in terms of recognising that as a borough that is so diverse, how do we make sure that our cultural offer, that those who design that offer, that those who shape that offer, and that those that produce in the arts are actually much better represented and exposed and given the opportunity to be exposed across our borough. Next slide, please, Bethan. And then the 4 other work streams are around communities, and here this is about hearing much more of the voice of residents from Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, and making sure that the assets that we're using are vibrant, are warm, are welcoming, and ensuring that there is a fair share of how assets are distributed across the borough. The interaction with policing work stream, obviously we know there are issues around things like stop and search. We know that there is distrust within our community. So the interaction with policing is how do we address those elements, and how do we ensure that there are positive role models within the police sector to kind of move forward with that work. And then the renewing the public realm is about our public spaces. We've obviously seen in the national media and locally around issues such as statues and naming, and the work around the renewing public realm is to pick that up. And finally, the council workforce workstream, which is very explicitly focused internally around our staff and how we ensure that the council is a positively anti-racist organisation in all its work and all that it does, and a lot of work underway in that. Next slide, please, Bethan. So in terms of who does what, very much, colleagues, again, picking up on where we started here, this is a cross-council approach, cross-council from the cabinet, cross-council from the officers. So as you can see, each member is aligned to a particular work stream, and that maps onto the portfolio responsibilities. So for example, Councillor Merrill with his safety portfolio maps onto our interaction with policing work stream. Similarly, Councillor Ali on the education work stream mapping into a children and young people focus. So that's kind of why each of the member leads takes political responsibility for the work stream, with Councillor Alice MacDonald having overall programme responsibility on behalf of the council, ultimately reporting through to the leader, who is the chief sponsor of the programme overall. Next slide, please, Bethan. And that maps onto, similarly, the officer leads. So the chief officer team are ultimately responsible for the entire programme. That's where responsibility ends. That's where the kind of buck stops, as it were, in relation to Southwark Stands Together, with the chief executive as the overall sponsor. I have responsibility for the programme coordination, making sure that the different strands tie up. And then, as you can see from that slide, each of the lead directors then lead on the specific work streams as set out. So I know we've got Tony here, for example, today, who leads on the culture work stream, and then jointly with our director of planning and growth on the public realm work stream. And so that's kind of, and again, that represents cross-council, cross-leadership ownership of the programme. And then underneath each of that, there will be task and finish groups, and there will be groups around delivery, including delivery leads under each of the work streams that are set out there. Next slide, please, Bethan. And what we do, colleagues, in order to report on progress is we have done an annual report, and we'll do so again next summer on the entire progress of the scheme, and I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. And also we do bi-monthly updates, including updates via the website. The bi-monthly update goes to Councillor MacDonald as the overall member lead, making sure that we're delivering against the actions both within the original recommendations and other actions emerging, including from as set out in the annual report. So that gives you a sense of how the different things happen. What these two slides do, this one and the next one, is just give you a sense of progress that we've made over the last 18 months. And you can see there it covers across all of the work streams. Just one or two to draw out because you can read the slide. But for example, we've supported lots of local businesses through the pandemic. 16.2 million of additional restrictions grant, which has been crucial in making sure that some of our smallest businesses, many from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, are able to survive and then move forward as we now move, as the restrictions got eased and we move into this phase of the pandemic, 48% of which are identifying as minority ethnic, and we're doing some more work to understand what should our offer look like going forward. The recent workforce report that went to Cabinet, I highlighted that we've seen that increase at senior management from 22 to 26%. Still a long way to go, colleagues. I know many of you will see that and say that, and that's the right thing, but equally positive direction of travel at the same time too. Next slide, please, Bethan. Oh, we've gone back a slide. And again, setting out, and here if I can just draw again, for example, the work that we're doing around greater diversification of board levels, which we're about to hear, making good progress there in terms of ensuring that we recruit a cohort of trustees from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds to be part of that process, and we're going to hear about that shortly. Next slide, please, Bethan. So hopefully that's given you a good sense of what the programme is overall. There's so much to say, and I've gone over my 6 minutes, so I've already messed our programme up. But you can see this just gives you a flavour, and I've not even got into the specifics and the details of some of the programmes. But hopefully it gives you a sense of the breadth and depth of what Southwark Stands Together is about. So as I said, next up we're going to hear a number of case studies, as I said, in terms of the specific areas of focus, and then we're going to go into a breakout room. We're going to look at, I think we've got 3 case studies to begin with, and then we're going to do a short breakout to get your ideas and thoughts on what you've heard and what we could do differently. We'll come back again, and then we're going to hear another 3 case studies, where we'll then do the same again, hear what people have got to say, and then we'll wrap it up at the end with a plenary on what you've heard, ideas for coming forward, which we can then take and build that into our programme work as we move forward into the next phase of Southwark Stands Together. Next slide, please, Bethan. And the next slide is indeed me handing over now to Rebecca. So thank you very much for listening to that overview. I hope that's given you a real sense of what Southwark Stands Together is about and a hint at some of the details. But now I'll turn to Rebecca to talk about, and I'm sorry, I didn't mention you, Rebecca, at the outset. I think I started with Margaret, but now I'm going to turn to Rebecca to talk about our Health Community Ambassador Programme. Rebecca, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Just checking everyone can hear me okay. If you could nod. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about some of the work that we've done working with communities as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic and how that fits in line with the Southwark Stands Together programme. And at the end, I'll pass you over to Jen, who's our Deputy Director of Public Health, who will kind of set out the next steps within the health strand of the work. So Bethan, if I could just have the next slide, please. Great. So just to add a bit of context to this, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, it's been reported nationally that the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And really that's exposed existing inequalities within society. And the main thing that I wanted to highlight here is some of the learning from the Southwark Stands Together survey, and in particular what we heard about barriers to health and care services for Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. So we heard that some of those barriers include cultural insensitivity, language barriers and distrust of services, some of which have been created from experiencing a loss of trust as a result of racial discrimination. And I just want to highlight that as I go into some of the work that we're presenting. So it's in your mind of why it's been so focused on working with communities, empowering communities and focusing on working in a way that builds trust. So Bethan, if I could have the next slide again. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to talk through some of the work that we've done with communities, focusing on assisting them and protecting themselves and to access support during the COVID-19 pandemic. And really the main things to highlight about these is that what we've tried to do is make sure that they're targeted at working with communities who have been disproportionately impacted, and also that we've tried to do this in a way that works and builds on existing community connections and relationships of trust within the community. So the first one is the Health Ambassadors programme that Stephen's already mentioned. We've recruited over 90 health ambassadors from diverse sections of the community, from residents and organisations, and their role is really to help inform, empower and support the community during the COVID-19 pandemic. So some of the stuff that they've done has been to make sure that accurate information is shared with the community about COVID-19 guidance, testing, vaccines and other support available. but they've also been pretty key in making sure that we're continue to hear about the barriers that our local communities are experiencing. And just to flag it, thinking about that targeted approach, we have recruited more ambassadors from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and that's really recognising the disproportionate impact of COVID and realising that that's where the ambassador scheme might be the most beneficial. The second area of work that I'll mention is the COVID-19 prevention grants. And again, these are focused on communities that are more vulnerable to COVID-19 infection and those who have poorer outcomes if infected. And what they are grants for community organisations to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So I think what's key about this is that it's working with those grassroots organisations which already have existing community connections and making sure, helping to enhance their capacity to respond to COVID-19 with their communities. So if we could go on to the next slide. And yeah, just an example of one of the recipients of our grants are Flashy Wings Ministry, who used the grant to run a few workshops on COVID-19 vaccines in particular. And just as a bit of a taste of the impact that it may have had is that attendees started off reporting, I think there were 42 attendees who reported that they intended to get the vaccine at the start of the workshops, and after that 148 attendees reporting their intention. And they also said that they saw some increased engagement with vaccines on their WhatsApp educational group. So people sharing information about taking their first jab and sharing photos of them receiving the jab. So encouraging people to think about uptake of their jab and keeping that conversation going. And if I could have the next slide, Bethan. Yeah, so I think the reason that I wanted to pull out Flashy Wings Ministry in particular is because they helpfully provided this quote, which I think summarises it quite well. And what they've said is, we believe that some of the reasons for the success of this project is because we tailor-made the questions in order to represent a voice for Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. The education and information provided were coming from people from the same cultural backgrounds, which encouraged trust. Professional guest speakers sharing their faith and cultural backgrounds were given the opportunity to address the public and debunk conspiracy theories. And so I just use that as a bit of an example to draw out really what we think has worked well here is the fact that those existing community connections are there and there's that relationship of trust, and that is the starting point for some of this prevention work. So if we could have the next slide, and I'll pass over to Jin to introduce himself and just add up any kind of wrapping up comments and next steps in terms of the health strand.
Hello, hi colleagues. Can you hear me? Is this working? Great.
Yes.
Hi colleagues. I'm very conscious of the time, and I think we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to be really fast. So colleagues, what I really welcome, I think there'll be an opportunity to discuss this in a bit more detail as part of the workshops. The community outreach grants and the community health ambassadors, they've been great pieces of work in terms of how they've outreached into communities and in terms of the uptake. So in terms of who we've recruited and the community ambassadors and the uptake of the grants, we absolutely welcome your input during the workshops to help us shape the programme further. I also wanted to quickly mention 3 other pieces of work that we're doing as part of this strand, this health strand. I won't go into it in a lot of detail, but they are important pieces of work. The first one is quite difficult. I mean, we felt that we should look at how systemic biases might occur in our commissioning and development of public health services. So we've just appointed an external organisation to help us do that, because we wanted that external informally facilitated reflection. So that's to look at how we collect data, how we understand needs, how we draft specifications, and how we do service redesign. We absolutely, again, welcome colleagues to join in on that. We hope that the piece of work might have applicability outside of the public health services. So do get in touch with us if you wanted to be part of that steering group. It's just about to kick off, so it's an opportune time to join us. The other piece of work that we're doing is around increasing uptake of our public health preventive services. We know that there's always a gradient in terms of who takes up our services, and we wanted to test refocusing our health checks, which are our cardiovascular health checks, to ensure that there is higher take up amongst our Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And again, that piece of work is happening, so welcome your thoughts during the workshop on that. And then the final piece of work is around the health and well-being strategy, which we are refreshing and redoing. And we think that there must be a strong community power element to the joint health and well-being strategy. And again, welcome your thoughts on that area. I'm going to stop there because I think we are running a little bit behind.
We're okay, Jim. We have built a little bit of time in, but thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. So, colleagues, we're going to hear 2 more short case studies now, and then we'll move into the breakouts. So, if I can turn to Margaret Agana, who'll be talking about art board diversification. Margaret.
You're on mute, Margaret.
Oh, Margaret, yeah, you're on mute if you can.
Hello again. My apologies. Okay. I'll be talking today about our programme, which is designed to called Black on Board, which is diversifying arts boards in Southwark. It's a programme of governance training and support for the leadership of arts, heritage, cultural organisations in Southwark, and it's aimed to support the organisations to explore ways in which to encourage the engagement of more diverse communities at all levels in their organisation, and to work towards becoming more reflective of the diverse communities that exist in Southwark. The programme gives the leadership of cultural organisations an opportunity to look at, in a supported environment and with their peers and alongside professionals with lived experience, some of the barriers to engagement that diverse communities may be experiencing, and to begin to modify policies and procedures and working practices to explore ways that these barriers may begin to be broken down, and to begin to put in place mechanisms to break these down further. The actual programme, Black on Board, is an existing programme which was being developed by an award-winning social enterprise that specialises in supporting people of colour into governance positions. And it was developed in partnership with the culture team. The culture team have devised a bespoke pilot programme building on the strengths of the Black on Board to meet the needs of aspiring arts trustees from diverse backgrounds, including some that have come from Southwark Council employees through other strands of Southwark Stands Together that have been trained by OMAC to be trustees on boards in the community. The programme also is a way to explore the lack of racial diversity, especially on arts boards in the borough, and to understand the reasons for this and understand why that within the culture sector, the majority of the governing boards are mainly from white backgrounds. So how the programme works is it offers the recruitment of a trained special independent director that would sit on the boards of the cultural organisation, and they'd be there as a placement with the organisation for a year, with the option for those cultural organisations by mutual agreement to actually have that delegate on their board as a full-time trustee should they want to recruit them. Access, it also offers access to learning and support, peer support sessions and training for the chief executives and also for the senior staff. And this will help them to design and develop good practice in organisational culture, policy, and look at how they recruit trustees in the future as well. And alongside that, there is professional support from the organisation OLMEC, which includes access to race equality resources, further training and opportunities to support participating organisations with their transformation journey, because it is a journey for organisations to look at how they can improve on what they're already doing. And at the end of the programme, each organisation will receive a race equality and diversity recommendation report from OLMEC, so to guide their strategic work in the future. So some of the challenges, I'm trying to keep it short because I realise that we're eating into the time. So some of the challenges that we faced during the programme was during the recruitment process. This is a strategic piece of work, and what we were asking was that the chief officer and the chair both attend a period of training for 6 months, and also accommodate the placement of someone on their board for another 12. So as we began to develop the programme, we realised that that was quite a challenge for some of the organisations, but we framed this very much as a pilot. And the organisation that we're working with, OLMEC, have been really accommodating and able to be agile in terms of being able to make adaptations to the programme to make it fit the what we find on the route to delivering this. So what was originally only to be attended by the chair and chief officer, we opened it out so that the chair could actually allocate some of the training sessions to other trustees, which worked better for people. Sorry. It was right, which worked better for people. So so the chair could actually delegate some of the sessions to up to 3 additional trustees. Another thing is the timescales for the recruitment. It is a board diversity. It's a strategic programme, and boards they tend to meet quite infrequently. So we had to look. Well, we've made a note of the need to ensure that there's a really long run up in the recruitment process. The most important thing about this programme is that it has sign off from the chair. So and the board, so it needs sign off at a strategic level, and we need people to commit to the principles so that this information is cascaded through the organisation and doesn't, just to make sure that the recommendations are implemented through the organisation and everybody understands how that might impact. So I would say one of the things that we would look at in the future is maybe looking at publicising it for a longer period of time. What I can say that for the first round, for some of the core organisations that we already work with, this has been talked about in the culture team for a while. So there were a group of organisations that were very aware of this coming on the horizon and were very keen to get involved. But we need that throughout the sector, so a longer run up to the actual recruitment process. In terms of opportunities for learning, the programme has offered Southwark staff the opportunity to actually put in practice what they've learned through other programmes they've been involved in. There's a staff development programme around Black on Board, where staff have been trained by OLMEC with the skills they need to be able to be effective board members. Some of those staff will actually be part of this programme, which is in addition to what they've already learned at OLMEC, as it's been adapted specifically for culture. So that's a great learning opportunity for anybody in the organisation that's looking for a development opportunity there to speak with their appropriate line managers about. As I said, some of the Southwark staff are already involved in the programme. What we do want in the future as well. Another piece of learning that we found along the way is that
just a few more seconds, Margaret, if that's
okay.
all right.
Okay, sorry. One thing is to ensure that we have a comprehensive programme of governance support for African, Caribbean and Asian and minority ethnic communities to access alongside the programme, because it is primarily geared at a particular sector of the culture industry, cultural groups that we deliver to. But what we don't want to see is a kind of brain drain happening, so that those diverse organisations are not actually being able to develop themselves and become stronger. So within that context, it should be looked at in a wider context alongside the existing BME groups that are in the borough.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Margaret. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to say one other thing, which was originally it was marketed just to arts organisations, but I think what we have to be aware of is that culture and cultural activities happen in so many different contexts. And we found that there is actually an appetite for people trying to make changes to their organisations, and other organisations that deliver creative and cultural activities have contacted us, but they are not cultural organisations. So yes, so we've embraced some of those, and so to make sure that we have a really good mix of organisations involved. And okay, as time is limited, I shall end there. But this is in the context of another body of work that the cultural team are actually putting together around Southwark Stands Together, which includes grants for groups and individuals, and working with local communities to have a conversation about the appetite for a Black cultural centre in the community.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Margaret. And like all of us, there's so much to say. It's so exciting, and your passion's just brilliant. I could listen all day, but I am conscious we have got others. So I'm going to move us to Andrew. And Andrew, if I can ask you to be reasonably brief, and then we'll move into our breakout. So Andrew's going to talk about the negative effects of ethnic disproportionality. Andrew.
Thank you very much. Bethan, can I have the slides, please? Thank you very much. OK, it's a joint presentation this afternoon with my colleague Kelly Wilson, who will go through our findings as part of the research that we've done. So we at the Youth Offending Service are very aware that young people, most of our caseload are from Black or minority ethnic backgrounds. And we want to know what the reasons for that were. Could I have the next slide, please, Bethan? So the reason we were looking for this was because of various things, including Southwark Stands Together. We know that David Lammy has done a lot of work challenging youth offending services and criminal justice agencies to talk about what is happening and why Black young people are more represented in the criminal justice system than white young people. And obviously our focus was very much after the death of George Floyd as well. But it's an ongoing process, and at the end of this presentation I very briefly want to talk about some findings from Her Majesty's Inspector at Probation, who have looked at the experiences of Black and mixed heritage boys. But if I can have the next slide, please, Bethan, thank you. So these are some Youth Justice Board statistics. It's too small for people to see, but hopefully we'll circulate these slides afterwards. But I want to draw your attention to the blue one, which tells us that Black children are 4 times more likely to be arrested than white children. And of those children arrested, they're far less likely to get a caution and avoid the criminal justice system, and far more likely to. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates that the top box, which is that Black and minority ethnic children are more than twice as likely to receive a custodial sentence than white children if they go to court. And also, if they go to a custodial institution, they're more likely to go to a more serious one, like a youth offending institute. Next slide, please. Her Majesty's Inspector at Probation had some views about this, and they felt that we at YOSSES should be working with our partners in criminal justice children's services and education to deal with underlying factors that might be causing disproportionality. But we were to work with them further upstream before children ended up at the doors of the YOS. So HMIP saw that school exclusions, policing processes, stop and search, as already mentioned, or court sentencing could also affect what's going on. So I'm now going to hand over to Kelly, who's going to go through our the research she did about what we found in Southwark was going on. So Kelly, over to you. And next slide, please, Bethan.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good afternoon to everybody. Disproportionality has been a huge issue for the Youth Offending Service for a long time. And I think as part of our research, we wanted to challenge all the ideas that everybody already had about it. So a lot of people would say many different things, but there was no evidence to back it up. So even before this Southwark Stands Together, really, we've been getting our statistics together. But what we found is that our statistics are similar to the Youth Justice Board data that was published recently, and it's across a number of indicators. We needed to do some proper research. If we could have the next slide, please, Bethan. So we looked at the whole caseload that we'd had as of last year. The main issues for us is deprivation. So our Black young people were far more likely to live in the poorest wards of the and lower super output areas of the borough. The access to health treatment appeared to be not as strong. Definitely, and we'll see on later slides, actually, the experience of adverse childhood experiences was far greater for Black children than for white children. Education, entertainment and exclusion, their experience of the court and the police generally, and as Andrew said, the likelihood of getting being sentenced at court rather than being allowed to have an out-of-court disposal, which doesn't affect a criminal record. Next slide, please, Bethan. So the work that we did, we found that over 3/4 of our caseload were Black young people, and that hasn't changed. That proportion hasn't changed over time. So this is an issue that we have had for a long time, but as the work will show, the disproportionality across different areas of the youth justice system has been increasing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the work that I did, and I won't go through all of it, but in terms of education, over 1/4 of the current YOS caseload, and when I say current, I mean as at the snapshot I did last autumn, were not in education, employment or training. And as you can see, the top bit, actually, these areas are higher for white young people than the Black and minority ethnic young people. So the real issue here, I think, is, and you could interpret it as, so just under 1/4 of white young people had a formal EHCP in place, and 19% of Black and minority ethnic young people had this. But if you look at the bottom there, over 60% of the YOS cohort has had at least one fixed period exclusion reported to the Department for Education, but it's 2/3 of Black and minority ethnic children experiencing this, compared to 1/3 of white children. So in terms of the EHCPs being on roll at mainstream schools, there is an argument, I think, that says, maybe these vulnerabilities and needs of this particular group aren't being identified soon enough. And I do genuinely believe that. And a slightly higher proportion of our permanent exclusions from school are also of this group. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so this data actually was MOPAC published data, and it is a little bit old, but I think it's still very relevant. And the police themselves found that Black and minority ethnic young people were more than twice as likely to be stopped and searched. And this is in Southwark. It's not across London. It's not, across the whole country. This is in Southwark. And Black children are more than 4 times as likely. And so I thought, OK, I'll go and have a look at this. So I looked at all the offences that our young people had been arrested for, and the proportion of those that was as a direct result of being stopped and searched. So possession of a knife, could be possession of drugs, etc. And 5%, that is 5 percentage points higher there for Black and minority ethnic young people than for the white young people. And it was also really interesting. There's a long held belief with youth offending workers that Black and minority ethnic young people are less likely to plead guilty at court. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I wasn't, even though, I mean, I manually read all of this data and I wasn't able to get the level of information I needed around why that might be. But that being said, over 17%, just over 17% of Black and minority ethnic young people entered a not guilty plea at court, compared to just 7% of white young people. And I've noted there that actually the circumstances are different for each offence, and it is quite a small group.
And Kelly, so sorry, Kelly, if I can ask you to just kind of sum us up, as it were, and I'm really sorry to push you.
Yeah, no worries. If we could go on to the next slide quickly. I think I only have a couple more.
Then I'll finish after that, Kelly.
Yeah, okay. Next slide, we can leave that one. I did want to go into the childhood ACEs just because that is really important here. Okay, so overall across the whole of the ACEs study, 2/3 of people that were in the control group had at least one ACE. By the time you get to the youth offending service, you're talking about 86%. And I think 12% of people have 3 or more, and by the time you get to the youth offending service, you're talking about over half. And again, I won't read it all out. What I will say is that the ACEs for the Black and minority ethnic young people were really, really different, far more likely to be experiencing physical abuse, and also more likely to have witnessed domestic abuse. And next slide, please.
I think we'll take it from...
I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah. Bethan, could you take me to the last but one slide, which starts at next steps, please? It's about 5 on. Thank you. Right. OK, I'll just very briefly finish. So we've discovered, obviously, there's all this disproportionality going on. And thank you, Kelly, for sharing all that information. We've also taken on the learning from HMIP inspection of Black and minority ethnic children in a number of boroughs, both in London and across the country, which actually found pretty similar things and found that, in fact, if anything, the situation is getting worse. So we're taking on board the learning from that inspection. We're definitely making sure our services for Black young people are culturally appropriate, and we're using partners with lived expertise in this arena. We're reviewing our current, Kelly will do another review of our statistics to see what's happening shortly. And we'll do some more work to be undertaken with our partners about reducing disproportionality in the borough. And last slide, please, Bethan. Thank you very much. And so I just thought we'd end with a bit of positiveness, what we think is actually helping to reduce disproportionality. Some of us be aware that there's currently a project that we're putting social workers into schools. And one of the findings of their input is that it's reducing the number of young people receiving either fixed or permanent exclusion, which hopefully will then have a knock-on effect for young people coming to us. We're very proud of our performance, that we've got the lowest levels of custody ever achieved in the 27 years that there's been a YOS, which means that few Black children are ending up in custody. And we're really proud of our partnerships with a number of Black-led organisations who are based locally, who help work with our young people. And the forthcoming very exciting project based at SILS, our pupil referral unit, where we're putting a YOS worker in there, should promote even greater inclusion and fewer exclusions. So we're hoping that we'll be moving forward in a positive way. Back to you, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Andrew and Kelly. And we will make sure the slides are available, because I know we had to jump over some, but some really rich and fantastic information there. Thank you both. And I can see some comments down the sidebar, which hopefully we can take into the breakouts as well. OK. Brilliant to have everyone back. We were going to kind of call into just some headlines from your breakout, but I'm conscious of time. And what I will say is, if colleagues want to put some comments down the side, we're going to capture all of that, including any questions. We're going to capture all of that and make sure, as I say, there's either a response or just to make sure we've not lost anything. So I'm going to move us straight into the case studies, if that's okay with everybody. I'm going to turn to Hamali to kind of pick up the reins next. Hamali, hello.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll just wait for my slides to come up. In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. My name's Regeneration, and the case study that I'm looking at is the Architect's Design Framework, which I was active in delivering and procuring. I can't take all the credit though. My colleague Jackie Flynn was the key driver behind this project, but unfortunately she is off sick, so not able to present today. Next slide, please, Bethan. So just to talk about what the framework is and the issues that we face. So in May 2020, we launched the Architect's Design Framework in partnership with the London Housing Consortium. And the purpose of the framework is for appointing architects for our future construction needs, to ensure the council's design ambitions are met and to gain speed to the market through streamlining the procurement process. Upon publication of the framework last year, it became apparent that there was a lack of diversity.
Hello?
Oh, we've lost you, Hamali.
From other practices. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, you're back in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so unfortunately, it's a widely known issue that there is a lack of diversity in the design industry. And so we took the opportunity and decided to take leadership and listen to those voices that reached out to us. And Southwark Stands Together gave us an opportunity to rethink and redesign how we could extend the Architect's Framework with a clear goal to drive change. Next slide, please, Bethan. We had a clear set of vision and objectives that we wanted to achieve. So we wanted to break down the barriers that existed, sending a clear message to the practices that the extension of this framework would have a particular focus on value. We wanted to enhance the existing framework to create the first framework with diverse practices, and ensure that the most ambitious developments within Southwark were open to everyone, and not just within Southwark, but the framework reaches out to all London boroughs and wider. So we wanted to open up those opportunities to all the smaller diverse firms, and also give us the opportunity to work with architects from a range of backgrounds and experiences that reflect the communities that we have in Southwark. Next slide, please, Bethan. So we were faced with a number of challenges. It's something that hasn't been done before. We needed a lot of manpower to deliver it because it was a lot of work. So we had to call upon different departments within the council to help us. We had lots of timescales, and obviously within the last year, the construction industry has faced many challenges with COVID-19 and Brexit affecting workforces, supply of materials, rise in costs, the change in health and safety legislation following on from Grenfell, and then changes to construction and meeting carbon net zero targets. Next slide, please, Bethan. So what did we do? We developed a new approach, and we recruited over 20 officers from regeneration, planning and Southwark Stands Together, who helped us in addition to their daily work. We reviewed over 120 submissions over, my computer decided to update, which is why I think we've reviewed 120 submissions across 7 lots. It took over 240 hours, and it involved reading many case studies, attending interviews with architects, attending moderation sessions to get consensus on our scoring. And yeah, it was very insightful, and I think everyone, and it was great to work with other departments within the council to do that together. Next slide, please, Bethan. So the framework, the extension of the framework had 20 places, and we were able to appoint 14 firms to those 20 places across 7 lots, all of which demonstrated clear evidence of how they demonstrate social value within their organisation and in the work that they do. Next slide, please. These are just an overview of the 7 lots, and within those there are different value bands as well, so it covers a range of categories across all different council sectors. Next slide, please, and that's my last slide. So how the framework will be used, like I said, across all council sectors, and where there are where certain projects exceed value bands, what we're trying to encourage is that larger with smaller, more diverse firms, so they opens opportunities to them. We're also looking at adding EDI and social value evaluation to each and every award, so which is not usually done, but we want to look at that for each procurement that we do of each architect to ensure that those are being kept up as well. That was very quick whistle stop tour, but if you've got any other questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marley, and top prize to sticking to new criteria of talk within our 3-minute slot. So thank you. But lots in there again, and I think a lesson for us here from this session, colleagues, is we probably need maybe a future session and to give a bit more time over because of the rich data that we're covering. So we will take that on board. I'm going to move us to Libby next to talk about very briefly about the Pioneers Fund. Libby.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. So I work in the local economy team and lead on Southwark Stands Together in relation to employment and business. So next slide, please, Bethan. So one of the core remits of our team is to support businesses to start up, thrive and survive and grow in the economic climate, and that obviously means inclusive growth, so supporting businesses from all backgrounds, those led by Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities to do so. So our commitment to the Southwark Stands Together programme is to ensure that all businesses in the borough have access to that support, and we know that people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities typically struggle to access finance, break into business networks and also access mentoring and business opportunities. So we particularly want to ensure our support is accessible to them. Next slide, please, Bethan. So we've just recently launched a business resilience support service. So in the wake of COVID and government funding for businesses impacted by the pandemic drawing to a close, we've just launched a support service to help them transition to online or diversify their income streams and help them become less reliant on government funding. To help the design of that service, then we sent a survey out to businesses across our communities. That survey had a good response rate of over 350 businesses responding, and 56% of them self-identified as minority ethnic businesses. So we very much incorporated their views into the design of the service to make sure it's hitting their needs. One of the reasons that was successful is because during the course of the pandemic, we built up an extensive mailing list of businesses looking for support from the council. And if they applied for a grant from us, we made sure we captured their equalities monitoring information. So we now got over 1,000 minority ethnic businesses which we can reach out to and engage with on topics such as this. So that's now up and running, and we're now sort of turning our attention to slightly longer term aspirations. So now looking at the Southwark Pioneers Fund. Next slide, please. So the core remit of the Southwark Pioneers Fund is to promote inclusive growth and ensure that those who are underrepresented in starting businesses and entrepreneurship have the facilities and resources they need to be able to start up and grow their business. So with broadly speaking, it's split into sort of 4 themes. So support for startups and people looking into self-employment, support for businesses who are a bit more established and seeking to grow, support for businesses to decarbonise and reduce their carbon footprint, and support for social enterprises as well. So Southwark Stands Together is a cross-cutting theme across each of these themes. And as we develop the fund, next slide please, then key questions that we'll be considering is how we ensure that the service is most accessible to Black minority ethnic businesses, but also other groups as well, such as young people who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, disabled people, and women as well, who are also underrepresented in business. One of the things we're looking at, or key questions for us, is to what extent we ring fence support for those target demographics. So do we commission certain contracts to target those demographics specifically? Do we commission one larger contract that ring fence funds within that, or do we perhaps just put targets in within that one contract? Each of those has got its different pros and cons to doing that. So we really also like to hear the views of people who are going to be using the service and involve them in that decision making. So if we've got time in the breakout group, I'd be really interested to hear from people if they've experienced issues like that or come across similar sort of questions if they've been designing services, as to how we can involve those people in that conversation, and if people have got any experience of that, how they would recommend we take that forward. So yeah, that's a very quick summary of where we're up to in the business support work stream.
Thank you, Libby, and helpful to have those questions there so we can put them into the breakout group, and also for being swift with your summary. Again, lots in there, so much in there, a session in itself. Okay, we're going to move to Angela, who's going to talk about positive action now. Angela.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen, bear with me a minute. Oh, okay, 1 minute. Right, sorry about that. Can you all, because I can't see you, I can only see one at a time, so can you all hear me okay?
We can, Angela, yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Angela Williams, HR Business Partner in Lead. I'm going to run through this very quickly. I'm listening to the brief, so extra quick. So welcome to the Workforce Workstream update. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the workforce workstream categories, the corporate target, and in relation to SST and our workforce, and then touch on positive action. So the workforce workstream is divided into 8 areas of focus, and they are all working to increase organisational understanding of equality, diversity and inclusion, as well as working to improve opportunities and progression for Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff. The workforce categories also form a framework for developing the SST departmental action plan. Hopefully most of you have heard of those, but just a quick explanation. This is where we look at, each department is looking at their issues and data relating to their staffing, structures, working practices, etc. And then in conjunction with staff, managers and senior leaders, develop action plans to look at addressing those inequalities that are identified within their own department. So the deadline for these drafts to be completed is the 31st of December 2021. Some of the outputs that have emerged from these working groups are the monthly communications to staff, the creation of the SST champions, inclusive mentoring, a pilot started there, revision of the recruitment practices, development of employment opportunity pathways. There are many more, but I'm going to stop there because we'll run out of time there. In terms of the corporate target, we do have one, and I'll read it out. I've got it there, and it says to ensure the top of the council's workforce is proportionately representative of Southwark's Black, Asian and minority ethnic population by 2030. So currently, our Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff currently make up 38% of our workforce, and they are concentrated in grades 1 to 9. This drops off significantly at grades 14 and above. So of our staff that are currently at grade 14 and above, 25% are from a Black, Asian or minority and ethnic background, and this is an increase of 2% since last year. There are a number of actions and initiatives underway aiming to increase representation at these levels, and one of these is to embed a positive action approach, which brings me neatly to my next slide. I'm not going to read through all of this. I'll just say I've added definitions here of what positive action is, but also what it isn't. And essentially, it's about levelling the opportunities for progression, because our data shows that, you know, this is not always the case. Examples would be to encourage applications from underrepresented groups, or to identify training or project opportunities to strengthen knowledge and experience for underrepresented groups. And it's about ensuring that we're all running the same race. So I've got 2 questions for you in the breakout rooms. I'm not sure, are we still having the breakout rooms? We are still, good. 2 questions if you get a chance to just to think about. One's around career progression, and Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff have told us that they feel disproportionately overlooked for progression compared with white colleagues, and we have data that supports this. So the question there is, what do you see as solutions to address this? And in terms of recruitment, in response to feedback we've had from staff, key changes were made to our recruitment processes as part of our positive action approach to removing bias from our practices. What suggestions do you have for better or more inclusive recruitment?
Thank you so much.
That's it from me.
Thank you, Angela, and that's fantastic. And again, there's a whole session, a whole day there, so let's capture those questions and see what we can do in the short breakout that we've got. Moving us really swiftly on, and Loretta, if I can ask you to try and stick to our kind of 2 to 3 minutes max, and the case study on Peckham Square, and then we'll move into our breakouts. Loretta.
Hi. So I am a planning project officer in the Old Kent Road team, and I chose to facilitate with engagement specifically to the built environment workstream and Peckham Library Square. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview of, not a good quality, bear in mind, but a quick overview of the engagement to date that Sphere One done and their approach. So initially they did not have an engagement team solely dedicated. It was the architects leading on it. So with COVID and trying to think of innovation at the heart of everything, they was doing things through social media, getting people to kind of reshare posts and sending messages to their DMs. So that's the screen grabs at the top. And by May 2021, they introduced a core engagement team. I think it was mangled by Mark or something, but Raji and Mark, I can clarify later, they led on it. So they set an approach to engage with local schools, religious organisations, local community groups, and try to develop a strong kind of communication strategy, to the point where they was even thinking of doing event days to kind of immerse themselves in the heart of Peckham through the consultation hub and the square, and making their faces known, and getting the word out about the project. Next slide, please. So where I come in on this, through the engagement work and my lens, I decided that we could push the boundaries of innovation by doing a podcast, which everyone, I think, connects with, especially those from diverse communities and millennials trying to go for the younger generations, looking at comms and language, trying to just be plain English and relate to them a bit more. So when tasked with doing this by Jazz originally, I looked at how we can look at all the work streams and link it back to healing and reconciliation work, as well as producing podcast themes that relate back to Peckham Square. So through having emotive conversations that discuss positive and negative memories, the architects will be able to take design qualities and apply it to the square. And through the theme topics that I will talk about on the next page, they will also be able to use information from that, and also ourselves as officers to improve policy and improve services. So would also like to point out, with this work being done, I hope it's a stepping stone for us to work together collaboratively, because the #1 complaint is that everyone's doing a similar project but not together. And I guess this is where we should start doing it, not just for Southwark Stands Together, but to improve the council holistically. Next slide, please. So these are just me mapping out podcast episodes, so I can just skim through them quickly. So before we even get to that, the reason I came across these themes in particular, I went back over the listening exercise that was done last year in 2020, and I realised that there was actually more information or qualitative data that we could extract from what people said, and that led me to looking at community facilities, education, employment, housing, and another one I can't remember. So looking at that, breaking it down into episodes for the podcast, we are looking at education and developing a legacy programme, which will be in line with Peckham Square, which is obviously a legacy project that feeds into our legacy programme. So with that episode, we aim to have discussions on education curriculum and system alongside the transition from education to career, as well as from primary school to secondary school. Another episode that will focus on community spaces and youth facilities. We'll discuss how important or significant these spaces are and what the future of community spaces within regeneration projects could look like. And then employment and career choices. By having our panelists, which I forgot to mention, are going to be 100% resident led. We hope to eliminate that kind of visual presence of the council, and as I said, dismantle that general council talk. It's just everyday English that they can culturally connect with. So with the employment and career choices, we will have our panelists talk through their experiences of having a 9-to-5 job, in addition to what their career aspirations were growing up versus what they actually achieved, and what further success would look like for them. Another topic is support for Black or ethnic minorities. This will be an opportunity for them to give advice to people who want to be business owners or entrepreneurs, to discuss like their areas of what they learned through their journey, and also be able to point out sources of funding and sponsorship that they can kind of connect to. Next slide.
Brilliant, Loretta. Can I just ask you to wrap up? I'm conscious of our time.
Okay, we could skip this. It's just another one that just goes through the episodes. So going on to kind of the area of Peckham stories. So the whole concept of the podcast is that it is promoted on social media for the youth to connect with, share comments under posts, as well as listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So with the Peckham stories, as mentioned before, is to share emotive memories, and Joelle de Fontaine posts most of them, so hence all the names. And we have people talk through their lived experiences, so we have recorded a few of them, and the next slide is basically an example of our first episode. If you can press play, please, Becca. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
Oh dear, it looks like it's not quite working, is it, Loretta? I was wondering, should we share that after the event and just let colleagues have a look at that? Is that all right, Loretta?
Yeah, that's fine. So long story short, to end on, you can follow us on Instagram, and we, as I said, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you can listen in. We've done 2 episodes. The most recent one, Interaction with Police, and today we recorded the built environment and self-policing/safety. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Loretta. There's so much in there, and I think someone commented national best practice here, which I'd echo, and we'll share that video. Colleagues, Sabrina is going to wrap you into the breakout rooms for about 4 minutes, and then we'll race back in for a very quick sum up. So away you go. Colleagues, welcome back. Welcome back. For those that I'm really conscious we've allocated to 3:30, and I know some colleagues will have places to go, commitments to make, so that's why I've kind of slightly rushed us. I started today with 2 points. I started with an apology and a thank you. I'm going to finish on those same 2 points. An apology that we have been over ambitious with our time scale. We could have covered so much. We could have taken up so much more time, but I hope it's it's given you the taster of what Southwark Stands Together is about and the breadth and depth of the coverage. We were talking about doing some follow-up work. We might want to consider maybe sessions where we look at the case studies in more detail to give justice to them and the presenters who were giving them. So that's something to think about. We'll take your feedback on that. Use the SST mailbox for that. So apologies we've had to rush it. But thank you for being here. Thank you for bearing with us with some of the technical issues. I hope it's helped to give that taster. I hope it's got you re-enthused if you weren't, or equally further interested in some of the areas. And I hope it's just given us that time to take stock, look back and just see what we've done, but also importantly challenge ourselves for how much further we can go as we move forward in the weeks, months, and as I said, what I see as years ahead. This is a big game changer. This is about a positive direction of travel. This is about sustaining that, and I think by working all together, having your ideas, doing events like this, I think that's what keeps activities like Southwark Stands Together going and going strong. So a huge thank you to everyone for attending today. A massive thank you to Sabrina for making it technically possible. A massive thank you to all those who did the case studies and put the time and effort into to present. We will be sharing the material. Have a lovely rest of the week, and if you have any plans for the rest of the half term, enjoy them, and I'm sure we will back around talking about these issues and opportunities again very soon. Thank you all. It's 3:31. I wish you a good afternoon. Bye bye.